vulnerability assignment and findings based on the Greenbone scan on the hidden Linux server. So I ranked these in groups for high vulnerability. I have 3 groups just based on what their purpose was, what port related to what, and how it relates as a whole to make it simpler on reporting for the high vulnerabilities. So a critical vulnerability was on port 21. There was multiple critical findings identified on the server grouped to illustrate the broader security impact. Port 21, used by file transfer protocol, was found to be vulnerable, specifically through the use of a compromised version of VSFTPD. FTP traffic is unencrypted, exposing usernames and passwords to packet sniffing and man-in-the-middle attacks. The VSFTPD backdoor allows attackers to trigger a remote shell on TCP port 6200, so then 6200 ties in to specially craft a login, and this transforms a common service into a full system compromise risk. So that is a very critical vulnerability. Then highlighting the exposure on 6200. This connects directly to another high severity vulnerability. This port is opened intentionally by the backdoor by VSFTPD after receiving a malicious login. No authentication is required to access the spawn shell on port 6200, and attackers can gain full shell access bypassing standard controls. The presence of this open port confirms that the system is actively exposed to exploitation, and an attacker could gain remote control, escalate privileges, deploy malware, or pivot within the network. So remediation to this would be eliminate backdoors and patch unknown exploits, remove the VSFTPD and replace with a trusted signed packet, or move to a secure more protocol like SFTP, block port 6200 and 1524 at the firewall, with performing forensic analysis for signs of compromise, and conduct a full malware rootkit scan and check for unauthorized users or services. We have some more. Disable to restrict access to internal management interfaces like Tomcat and Postgres services. Enforce strong authentication, firewalls or VPNs, and apply latest patches. Harden public-facing services, and close undocumented or unused ports. So moving on, we have our high vulnerability group 2 on the Linux server. So this consists of ports 5432 and 1099. This is grouped together because this group involves critical services tied to data management and remote communication. Misconfiguration or lack of access control can lead to unauthorized access, data breaches, or remote code execution. Associated risk and exploitation of potential with 5432 Postgres, unauthorized access due to weak/default credentials, and the impact is data extraction, privilege escalation, internal lateral movement, with the 1099 risks conclude of vulnerable to remote code execution. If exposed, impact is execution of arbitrary Java code resulting in full system compromise. And then a combined threat, attackers exploiting RMI may pivot to the database or vice versa, compounding system risk. Then the remediation with this would be enforce strong authentication for PostgreSQL, harden Java RMI access with security policies, and input validation. Access controls restrict access to trusted IPs using firewalls, disable unnecessary or legacy services, and then for the network segmentation and monitoring, isolate database and remove management services from public exposure, enable logging and real-time monitoring. Moving on, we have group number 3 on the Linux server. And in group number 3, we have port 80, which relates to HTTP, port 3632, disk daemon, port 8787, webmin, port 8009, Tomcat. So key risk with this group is the Apache Tomcat vulnerability. This can allow a DOS attack and remote code execution. GhostCat on port 8009 enables file read execution via insecure. And then port 3632 allows unauthorized remote code execution if misconfigured. And then webmin on port 8787 often suffers from outdated software and weak access controls. So this has a high threat impact. Scenarios could be remote code execution, unauthorized access, sensitive data exposure, botnet recruitment, and real-world examples of this are the GhostCat vulnerability and the slow Loris attack. So remediation would consist of patch and update, configuration, hardening, and monitoring and prevention. Implement intrusion detection systems for real-time threat visibility, perform regular vulnerability scans, and penetration test are some of the things we could do. Moving away from the high vulnerabilities, we're going to the medium vulnerabilities. So the medium risk ports open found on the Greenbone scan were port 22. And this could result in remote login interfaces. Port 21, unsecured file transfer. Port 80, web server could be potentially exposed. And port 445, Windows style file sharing, which could be Samba. And then 5432 is an open database port. So we have port 22 and port 21 grouped together with remote access and file transfer. Port 22 is a possible brute force target. Port 21 sends data in plain text. With port 80 and port 532, we have as a web application services. Port 80, no encryption, and vulnerable to sniffing and injection. Port 5432, remote database access, risk of credential theft, and then finally file sharing services on port 445. It is a common vector for lateral movement and worms. So we have some remediation, disable password authentication for port 22, and then for port 21 replace with SFTP over just FTP on port 21. Then we have some more remediation for port 80, redirect traffic, port 5432, restrict access, and then port 445, disable Samba unless explicitly needed, and limit sharing to authenticated users. This will have firewall rules to restrict network access. And then I have some sources in the APA format, and that's all I have. Thank you for watching my presentation.